All right, let's kick off another deep dive. This time we're gonna take a look at the Excelsior Henderson SuperX motorcycle.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, it's a story about a revived American brand, but one that unfortunately flamed out way too soon.
Yeah.
And we've got some pretty cool sources for this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've got a vintage motorcycle YouTube channel.
Yeah.
It's by this guy that calls himself Grandpa Grumpy Pants.
Oh, wow.
I know, right? And then some old owner forum posts from way back in the early 2000s.
Oh.
Yeah. And then even some official factory documents. Stuff like the rider's handbook and the service manuals, the whole 9 yards. So what we're going to try to do today is really get to know this unique bike, and then the dedicated community that's kept them running all these years. And then, of course, what it takes to actually maintain one of these things.
I think that's really interesting. It's such a great example of how a machine can really capture the imagination and inspire people to keep it going, even after the original manufacturer is no longer around.
Exactly.
It's a real testament to the enduring appeal of this particular motorcycle.
Right. Absolutely.
That it was only in production for such a short time.
Right.
But the impact is still felt today.
So let's rewind the clock. Let's go back to like the late 1990s, right?
Okay.
American motorcycle manufacturing was making like a huge comeback.
Yeah, it was an exciting time for sure.
And right in the middle of that, you've got the Excelsior Henderson Motorcycle Manufacturing Company.
Yeah.
And they come along and they've got this ambitious goal of reviving this brand that goes all the way back to the early 1900s.
Wow.
I know. It's pretty crazy. They even built, get this, the world's largest motorcycle manufacturing facility in Belle Plaine, Minnesota.
No kidding. I did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a pretty bold statement. And the SuperX itself, this motorcycle, it was designed to kind of capture that same energy.
Yeah.
They wanted a modern cruiser, but one with a clear nod to classic American style.
Yeah, they definitely succeeded in that. The SuperX is a beautiful machine.
Yeah. It is.
It's got that classic look, but with a modern twist. It's really a unique blend of old and new.
Well, and they actually, and this is pretty incredible. I mean, considering how short a time they were in business, right? They actually produced over 2,000 SuperX motorcycles. All right, like before they closed up shop in 2000.
Wow, that's more than I would have guessed.
Yeah, it's amazing. And what's really fascinating to me is that instead of just kind of disappearing, the SuperX, it actually found a whole second life, and it was all thanks to this community of just dedicated owners. Like they weren't going to let these bikes just fade away.
Right. It's really remarkable. I mean, they really embraced the challenge of keeping these motorcycles running.
Yeah.
They became their own mechanics, their own experts.
Right.
They turned to online forums, to share knowledge, to troubleshoot problems, to figure out how to get parts. I mean, it's just amazing to read through some of those early forum posts,
Yeah.
You get a real sense of camaraderie,
Right.
and resourcefulness.
Well, and it was clearly more than just riding the bikes. It was keeping them alive.
Right. Exactly.
And there was this one post I saw, and it said that somebody's SuperX was in pieces.
Oh, wow.
I know. And I was like, that just, to me, that just perfectly captures that whole like hands-on spirit,
Absolutely.
of this community.
They weren't afraid to get their hands dirty.
No.
And really dive deep into the inner workings of these machines.
Which kind of leads us into the technical side of the SuperX. Right. So let's unpack what makes these bikes tick. So the rider's handbook, it touts this powerful, 85 cubic inch, 50-degree X-twin engine.
Okay.
With fuel injection. So pretty high tech for the time.
For sure.
And it's also got a 5-speed transmission and this really unique anti-dive front suspension design.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And that's, for those who might not know, that helps prevent the front end from dipping too much when you're braking hard.
Oh, okay.
So it makes her, much smoother and more controlled ride.
That's a nice feature, especially on a larger motorcycle like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is important to remember, right? This is not a small bike.
No, not
This is a substantial machine.
Yeah, okay.
Weighing in at 647 pounds. Dry.
Wow.
I know. That's a lot of motorcycle to handle.
Yeah, you gotta be confident to wrestle that thing around.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's see. So speaking of handling, let's kind of shift gears here a little bit. And talk about some of the common maintenance challenges that SuperX owners have had to deal with over the years.
Right.
So we've got some great insights. We've pulled those early forum discussions. Of course, we've got Grandpa Grumpy Pants and his YouTube channel.
Of course.
And it even some nuggets of wisdom from that factory service manual.
Cool.
Yeah. So this is really where we get to see just how ingenious this community really is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And learn some really valuable tips along the way.
Yeah.
Right? And that could come in handy for anyone who owns one of these bikes or is thinking about getting one.
Right, because even though the manufacturer is gone, there's still a wealth of knowledge out there, thanks to this dedicated community.
So one issue that seems to keep popping up is this valve cover gasket leak.
Oh, yeah. I've heard about that one.
Right. Apparently, it was kind of a real pain in the neck for owners.
Yeah. It's a common problem with air-cooled engines. And the SuperX engine, it's a big, powerful engine.
Right.
It generates a lot of heat, and that heat can really take a toll on gaskets and seals.
Right. So it's interesting though, because the SuperX community, they really came up with some pretty creative solutions.
Oh yeah. What did they do?
Well, Grandpa Grumpy Pants, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, he recommends using a belt sander.
Really? A belt sander?
To plane the valve cover surface, just to create like a perfectly flat mating surface and hopefully prevent those leaks from coming back.
I mean, that's a pretty unconventional approach.
Right.
But hey, if it works, it works, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it just speaks to their willingness to think outside the box,
Yeah, absolutely.
to find solutions. And sometimes those unconventional solutions, they really are the best ones.
Sure.
Then of course you've got the electrical gremlins.
Oh yeah. The dreaded electrical gremlins.
Right, that plagues so many motorcycles.
It seems like every motorcycle has its own unique set of electrical gremlins.
Right. But Grandpa Grumpy Pants, he points out something pretty interesting. And it's something really simple. Loose battery cables.
Oh wow.
Yeah. They were apparently a really frequent cause of unexpected engine cutouts.
I wouldn't have thought of that.
Right. So it's a good reminder that even with these really complex machines, sometimes the simplest solutions, those are the best ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where those forum discussions can be so valuable,
Right.
You're tapping into this collective knowledge base that's been built up over years of trial and error.
And speaking of trial and error, let's talk tuning for a second.
Okay.
So there's this one modification. It seems to have achieved like legendary status in the SuperX world.
Okay.
Right. It's called the Engelhardt Enricher circuit.
The Engelhardt Enricher circuit. Right. What's that all about?
Yeah. So owners, they rave about how it solves this pretty common problem with the bike's fuel delivery. Okay. And it apparently leads to a smoother ride and better performance overall.
So it's like a fuel management system.
Kind of, yeah.
Interesting.
But before we get too deep into the the modifications,
yeah,
let's go back to basics for a second.
Okay.
Right, because the SuperX, like any machine, it needs regular TLC to stay in top shape.
Absolutely, regular maintenance is key to keeping any motorcycle running smoothly.
Yeah. So one of the first things that the Rider's Handbook emphasizes is using the right oil.
Oh yeah, oil is the lifeblood of an engine.
Right.
Right.
And this engine in particular, it's a beast.
Yeah.
It needs proper lubrication to really handle the stress and the heat.
Right.
So they recommend an API-rated SF or SG oil with the 25W50 viscosity.
Okay. So a pretty thick oil.
Yeah. And that higher viscosity, that's really key for an engine of this size.
Yeah. Especially in warmer climates.
Right. And of course, you've got to be checking that oil level regularly.
Of course.
The handbook recommends the classic dipstick method.
Oh yeah, the trusty dipstick.
Right. But even that simple procedure, that sparks some pretty heated debates in the forums.
Based about how to check the oil.
I know. It's crazy. Like some owners, they were adamant that you had to check the oil with the bike on the side stand.
Right.
Others insisted that it had to be perfectly upright. And then you've got this whole other debate about checking the oil when the engine's cold versus warmed up.
Wow. So many different opinions.
I know it's kind of mind-blowing. But I guess it goes to show just how much these owners care about getting things right, you know.
Right.
And how much they rely on each other to really figure out those best practices.
Well, and it's also a testament to the fact that even with something as seemingly straightforward as checking the oil, there's always room for interpretation and
Right.
Personal preference.
Yeah. Yeah. And another point of contention
Okay.
was drive belt tension.
Ah.
So
Yeah.
so the maintenance manual, it's got this very specific procedure for measuring this. Okay?
Right.
And they say you've got to use a tension gauge,
Okay.
and you want it to be between 1/4 inch and 3/8 of an inch.
All right. So pretty precise.
Yeah, very precise. Because apparently, a loose belt that can lead to slippage and premature wear.
Right.
But a belt that's too tight,
Mhm.
that can put a lot of strain on the bearings.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So they're really trying to find that sweet spot.
Right.
And of course we can't forget the spark plug.
Yes. The humble spark plug.
Right. I mean, the writer's handbook, it even mentions like the ideal color for the insulator. you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. They say you want it to be like a light or medium tan.
Okay.
And that indicates good combustion.
Right.
But if it's sooty black or overly white, that could be a sign of a problem.
Interesting. So you can actually tell a lot about the engine just by looking at the spark plug.
Exactly. It's like a little window into what's going on inside the combustion chamber.
That's cool.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From that historical backdrop to all the the technical nuances of keeping a SuperX running smoothly.
Right.
But to me, the thing that really stands out is the dedication and the passion of these owners.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they've really kept the legacy of the SuperX alive.
Yeah.
Long after the factory doors closed.
And they took this potential disappointment, right? And they turned it into this thriving community.
Yeah.
That's kept these bikes alive, really. Long after the factory closed.
It's really inspiring. It shows that even when a company fades away, the spirit of its creations can live on.
Exactly.
Through the people who love and cherish them.
And they really do. They clearly love these bikes.
Yeah.
So let's pause here for a second
Okay.
and take a quick breather. All right.
Oh.
And then when we come back, we'll delve a little deeper into the challenges and the triumphs
Okay.
of keeping these bikes on the road.
Sounds good.
And we'll explore whether or not there might be a future for the SuperX brand in the years to come.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So we'll be right back after this.
All right, so welcome back. We've been talking about the rise and fall of the Excelsior Henderson SuperX, a motorcycle that, it's clear, really captured the imagination of a whole community of owners.
Yeah. And we were just talking about how that community, they really stepped up to the plate and became experts themselves, right?
Yeah.
Just to keep these bikes running. But I'm curious, like, what were some of the specific challenges that they faced, and what kind of solutions did they come up with? Let's dive back into those forum discussions and see what we can find.
Well, one topic that comes up again and again is oil.
Oil, the lifeblood of any engine.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
and specifically what type of oil is best for the SuperX's, powerful X-twin engine.
Right. Because using the wrong oil, I mean, that can lead to all sorts of problems down the road. And it sounds like the consensus was that API-rated SF or SG oil with a 25 W50 viscosity is the way to go.
Yeah. That's a thicker oil, It's
Right.
It's designed to handle the higher temperatures and the stresses that this particular engine can generate.
Right.
But it's funny because you see all this debate about something as simple as checking the oil level.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There were like a few different schools of thought on that, right? Like some owners, they swore by checking the oil with the bike on the side stand.
Right.
And then others, they said, no, you got to have it perfectly upright. And then there's the whole cold versus warm engine thing.
Right. Yeah. It really just highlights the fact that even when you have, pretty clear instructions in the writer's handbook, there's always going to be some room for interpretation.
Right. Yeah. A little bit of personal preference thrown in there too.
Absolutely.
It's like those old family recipes,
Yeah.
where everyone's got their own little twist. Except instead of secret ingredients, we're talking about like oil levels and motorcycle maintenance.
Yeah.
So speaking of maintenance, Tuning is another area where the SuperX community really came together and shined,
Yeah, they were passionate about getting the absolute most out of their bikes.
Yeah.
And they weren't afraid to experiment.
No, not at all.
Try different settings, different modifications.
Right. Well, and we talked about that Englehart and Richer circuit earlier.
Right.
Which, I mean, that seems to have been just a total game changer for a lot of owners. But there's just countless other examples of little tweaks and adjustments that owners, figured out and shared with each other.
It's like this constant, quest for the perfect SuperX setup.
Right. But beyond the performance stuff, there were some practical problems that owners had to deal with, right? I mean, any machine, especially one that's no longer being made, it's going to have its quirks. And the charging system seems to have been a bit of a trouble spot. I was reading through some of the posts, and there were a lot of mentions of issues with the voltage regulator, the alternator, even some wiring gremlins.
Yeah, electrical problems. I mean, those can be just a nightmare to diagnose sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
But luckily, the SuperX community, they did a great job of documenting these issues, sharing troubleshooting tips, repair guides.
Yeah. It's like having a whole network of virtual mechanics at your fingertips.
Exactly.
And then there's the fuel injection system. That seems to have caused, its fair share of headaches too.
Yeah. Fuel injection systems, they can be pretty finicky.
Yeah.
There were threads about clogged injectors, faulty sensors, even some issues with the fuel pump itself. But again, the community was able to come together and really, offer solutions.
It's really remarkable, how they were able to overcome all these obstacles without any support from the manufacturer.
Yeah, for sure. But it's also important to remember that for all the challenges, the SuperX, it was a well-designed machine.
Oh yeah.
It had a lot to offer. I mean, that X-twin engine.
Oh yeah.
It's a real gem,
Right.
known for its torque, that distinctive rumble.
Yeah. And despite its weight, that chassis, it's actually surprisingly agile.
Yeah. It's a bike that can handle, long distance cruising.
Yeah.
But also, spirited backroad riding too.
And you can't forget the styling. I mean, it's a classic American cruiser, but with that modern edge. You know?
It's a bike that turns heads, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
It makes a statement. It says I appreciate craftsmanship.
Yeah.
I value tradition, but I'm also, I'm not afraid to stand out from the crowd a little bit.
Which perfectly describes the SuperX community too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. They embrace the challenge of keeping these bikes alive, and in doing so, they really created something special.
Makes you wonder, could there be a future for the SuperX brand?
Oh yeah.
Perhaps a revival under new ownership, or even just a community-led initiative to bring back this iconic machine.
Yeah. That's a really thought-provoking question, and it's one that we're gonna explore further in just a bit. But first, I think it's time to hear from you, our listeners.
Yeah.
Have you ever ridden a SuperX?
Yeah, we want to hear from you.
Or maybe you've got a story about encountering one out on the road.
What was your impression?
Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts. So we'll be right back after a quick break to delve into the future possibilities for the Excelsior Henderson SuperX.
And we are back. All right, so we're wrapping up our deep dive into the Excelsior Henderson SuperX, and we've uncovered the history. We've gone through the all the technical stuff, the nuts and bolts, and we've really gotten a sense of this passionate community that keeps these bikes out there on the road.
It really is remarkable. I mean, we talked about the challenges, right?
Yeah.
But they took this potential disappointment and turned it into something really special.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a real testament to their ingenuity and dedication.
Yeah. I mean, it is inspiring, isn't it? They face those challenges, head on, like those oil leaks that we were talking about,
right.
the electrical gremlins, the fuel injection problems, and they turned these online forums into this collective workshop, right?
Yeah. They're sharing knowledge, they're troubleshooting problems, they're coming up with solutions together, and they did it all without any support from the manufacturer.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It really is. They had to become experts themselves.
Right.
You know, deciphering service manuals,
Yeah.
experimenting with modifications,
Yeah.
really pushing the boundaries of what these bikes could do.
It makes you think, like, what if Excelsior Henderson had, been able to stay in business?
Right.
But then again, maybe this whole community-driven approach, maybe that's what makes the SuperX experience what it is.
Yeah. It's an interesting thought. You know, maybe that shared passion, the resourcefulness,
Yeah.
that's really what gives the SuperX its unique character. It's more than just a motorcycle at that point. It's a symbol of resilience, of the power of collective knowledge.
So where do we go from here? What does the future hold for the SuperX? Could we actually see a resurgence of the brand?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, maybe a new company will come along inspired by the legacy of the SuperX. Or maybe, a group of enthusiasts will decide to take up the mantle and start building them again.
Yeah.
It's certainly possible. I mean, the demand is definitely there. We see it in the online communities, the rising value of these bikes.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of interest in this little slice of American motorcycle history.
Man. Imagine, like, a whole new generation of SuperXs, but built with, modern technology,
right?
But still retaining that classic soul, that character.
Yeah.
It would be a fitting tribute to the original.
Absolutely.
And a testament to the community that kept the dream alive.
For sure.
It's a nice thought. I really like that. It's a tantalizing possibility. But even if it doesn't happen, the story of the SuperX, it's a reminder, that sometimes the greatest legacies, they're not forged in factories.
Right.
They're forged in the hearts and minds
Yeah.
of the people who believe in something special.
Well said.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of the Excelsior Henderson SuperX. We hope you enjoyed the ride.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. We covered a lot of ground today. We talked about the rise and fall of the company, the technical ins and outs of keeping these bikes running.
Yeah.
But I think most importantly, we saw the power of community.
Absolutely.
The power of passion.
Yeah.
And a shared love for a really unique machine.
And if you're ever lucky enough to see a SuperX out in the wild, take a moment to really appreciate it.
Yeah.
All the work, the dedication that goes into keeping it on the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And who knows, maybe you'll be inspired to join the ranks of the folks who are keeping the spirit of the SuperX alive.
That would be great.
Yeah. So until next time, keep those engines revving, keep the knowledge flowing, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.